50 the time now. From September, working parents in England will be able to claim 30 hours free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds. That's double what is offered right now.
This might be welcomed by some families, but some nurseries say the financial pressure of providing additional free hours could put them out of business. We visited a nursery to see what parents thought.
As of September, I think every child can get 30 hours free. How it's going to affect us, I'm not too sure at the moment.
For most working parents, it would be very, very welcome, but I realise that for childcare providers, it's actually going to be a massive cost.
Talk to different people, everybody tells you different things that they're doing, and it's taken a long time for the nursery to be able to let us know how they're hoping to do it.
The 30 hours funding is underfunded by the government, yet at the same time nurseries are facing increases to the minimum wage, increased business rates, increased pension contributions, and a really high demand for high quality childcare. Some of the possible effects are going to be a loss of flexibility in the way that we offer the funding, the ability that we have to employ really high quality and high qualified staff, and just the general quality of the childcare. We don't know how many parents are eligible at the moment, but what we are going to do is offer the 30 hours funding, but with an additional charge to parents. It is voluntary, but if parents choose to pay that additional charge, we will be able to offer the 30 hours funding to them.
It's interesting they're considering a voluntary charge there. Councillor Richard Watts, chair of the Local Government Association's Children and Young People's Board, joins us from our London studio. Morning to you. Neil Leitch is a chief executive of the Preschool Learning Alliance, which runs childcare centres and represents providers in England. Morning both. Thank you very much indeed. Neil Leitch, first of all, we're hearing reports of some nurseries having to close because of having to provide this extra childcare, 30 hours. Have you seen that reflected?
Sadly, it's increasingly the case. I mean, almost on a daily basis, I receive either telephone calls or letters on my desk that basically come from providers that have been in business for 10, 20, 30, 40 years in their communities. And this, they think, is the last straw, frankly. Yesterday, a letter that arrived, nursery in a rural community, been there for 27 years, had to close because they cannot make the funding work. And the 30 hours they consider to be, frankly, the nail in the coffin.
Do you want to just give us the basic explainer as to why they think they can't carry on? The money that they're saying the money that will be available to them cannot be spread as widely to cover the hours. Is that the simple equation?
Well, I think the first thing to recognise is there's no such thing as free childcare. The 15 hours that 3- and 4-year-olds, for example, are entitled to, it's cross-subsidised. It's basically funded by those parents who take additional hours, or it's funded by providers who take a greater loss or a greater reduction in profits. So there's no such thing as a free offer. So if all of a sudden you double the number of hours, effectively you exacerbate the problem. You remove the ability to be able to cross-subsidise, and that's why providers are going to struggle.
Let's talk to Councillor Richard Watts. So the government is saying there is an additional £1 billion a year to pay for the free offer, raising the total hourly funding rate to local authorities to £4.94 an hour. I mean, these figures ultimately are what it comes down to. I mean, is that enough money or not?
All our member councils, and I hear exactly the same nurseries that Neil hears telling me exactly the same thing they tell Neil, say that money isn't enough. I mean, we shouldn't forget this is potentially a really good scheme. You know, children benefit from spending time in childcare, and I know as a parent of small kids myself that the costs of early years childcare can be absolutely crippling. So we shouldn't write the scheme off. However, it's underfunded and there isn't enough local flexibility for councils and nurseries to implement the scheme as the people who know their areas best see fit.
How are they going to do that if the money is just not there? It's too stretched.
Well, I think that's a real issue, and although we welcome the extra money that's come in, there simply isn't enough money yet in the system to make this really work. What we've seen is some trials of how this scheme will work, and it is putting some real pressure on nurseries, on nursery schools, on schools that are trying to get this into their own school nurseries. And the big thing that councils need is both more money and more flexibility in local areas.
Neil, if I'm reading this correctly, I mean, come September, actually the situation for people seeking childcare generally possibly could get worse if it's true that so many places are closing. I mean, clearly that is worse than having some care.
The reality is that there's going to be a lot of disappointed parents turning up at nurseries and childminders, asking for their extended hours, and they won't be available. You'll have providers that basically are going to limit the number of places. I mean, we're in a chaotic situation. In the last 4 years alone, we've lost 10,000 childminders. Now, here we're looking to expand the programme, and we've got a workforce problem, we've got a funding problem. There's going to be lots of disappointed parents.
Can you put a number on? I mean, 1 billion is the Department for Education saying they're putting 1 billion in. What is it? 2 billion? What is the number?
OK, to be clear, that £1 billion, it's not extra money, basically, going to providers. £300 million is what they put in to basically raise.
So can you put a number on what would be required?
About another 20% of what we get at this particular point in time, which is £4.38, I should say, not £4.94.
OK, thank you both very much. This is what's happening in England. In Scotland, all 3- and 4-year-olds are entitled to receive up to 600 hours of free early learning and childcare per year, and that's all entitlement has been extended to some 2-year-olds as well. Thank you both.
7:56 is the time now. That means it's time to get the news, travel.